Hello, Cosplay World. We are back, and this time around we have some blasters, and then, this is the third in a 6-part series of our Final Fantasy XIV Paladin armor set. And these blasters are a secondary prop because the sword and the shield are very wieldy. So this is a good option for walking around the con without being quite so encumbered. Alright, so we're going to start with an MDF wood base. MDF is kind of a wood-ish thing. So, we need 8 of these because we have 2 blasters. Each blaster has 2 sides, and each 2 sides have a top and a bottom, making 8 of exactly the same template, although we will be editing them to be more dimensional. We will have some support pieces in 1/2-inch MDF as well. But for right now, we just need these templates done. This is my scroll saw. It's going to do kind of a lot of really good detail. Scroll saws are really good for details, but you need a strong hand, a good steady hand to do long, cleaner cuts. For that, I would go to a band saw for curves or even curves because it has a larger blade and you're able to get more smooth curves out of larger blades. But for really, really detailed stuff, the scroll saw has been working out really well for me. I gotta stop using really. I'm a crazy person. Oh well. The thing that we're gonna run into in this tutorial is that there are just so many parts that if I were to try to cover every single piece of the armor, even if I were to put 2 or 3 different pieces of the armor itself into the tutorial set, I would end up with a 12-part series because there's the gloves and the arms and the feet and the legs and the eye patch and the chest plate and the back plate and the sewing and things like that. I'm going to try and cover as best I can, but still it's a 6-part series. If you want to see a lot more of the details and every single piece that went into this set of armor, check out finalcosplay.com and we'll have a picture section and you'll see all of the wonderful details that went into this work. I'm exceptionally happy. I hope you do check that out. Okay, so we have the main pieces. To create a bit of dimension, what we're going to be doing is actually screwing the front facing together, adding a bit of this 1/2-inch MDF in the middle because we need to kind of support the grip, and then offsetting the back section, which comes to a point, by about a 1/2 inch. So by pushing one piece of wood up 1/2 inch, it's going to cause it to bow and create more dimension, and it looks cool. Now, the MDF here is only here for structure. We're going to try and keep the weight to a minimum and towards the back wherever possible because the handle is way towards the back of the prop, and if we have a lot of weight towards the front, it's going to tend to slant downwards. And with this design, that's a real big problem because it's very bulky in the front. What I end up doing with a lot of the bulk is using light materials such as XPS foam, extruded polystyrene, the pink foam, which is much lighter, and then coating that with a bit of Warbler so that when it eventually is put down, it doesn't destroy it. And I try to create as many cavities and light spaces as possible towards the front, but the design is very front heavy, so I imagine that holding a pose with them, you'd either have to turn them to the side so that you have less of that issue, or you can only hold them vertically for a very limited amount of time. So we're going to put these screws into place and mount them down, and then we have our base shape here. We have a bit of PVC pipe towards the that's going to act as our handle, and then you'll see there's a little strip of plastic there, a little bit of T-Peg or PETG plastic. It's a very flexible material. There is nothing in the design to stabilize the 2 front sections, so to keep them together, to keep them from wobbling out of control and away from each other, we are going to stabilize. Then we're going to attach them together with this plastic, and we need to do this before we actually kind of add any of the detail pieces because we need to work around them in order to make sure it's nice and strong. So yes, you see me adding the EVA foam, or sorry, XPS foam to the front there, and we're going to be covering that with Warble. We're going to be sanding it, we're going to be smoothing it so that it can take a hit when eventually it is put down someplace. Our details are going to be done in wherever there's strips, we're going to be adding the PVC foam sheeting because it's very easy to make strips from that. But all of the curved sections, all of the bits where there is rounded details, it's much easier to use Warbler for those, because cutting out complex shapes in plastic and in other more rigid materials is exceptionally time consuming. You have to draft it, and then you have to cut it out, and then you have to smooth it and round it and then glue it into place. Whereas Warbler has the advantage of being self-adhesive and being thermoformable. So a lot of the details you'll see are raised in Warbler. They're just simply strips of the material that we've heated up, and as we go, we kind of just stretch them a little bit, heat them up, stretch them a little bit, heat them up, stretch them a little bit, in order to create these more complex shapes. Along the edges, we're going to be filling in and smoothing out the places where it's all cavities, all empty, where it's just void with Bondo, and smoothing out where we have those bits of MDF with Bondo as well, so that they're nice and clean. They're all going to be sanded down and cleaned up before we start adding the paint too. But right now we just have the base shape. A lot of the projects I do have sanding. I don't show too much of it, but that is something that needs to be taken into account, is cleaning up all your work, making sure all your lines are crisp and clean and you don't have gaps before we start painting, because the thing that can happen is that we start exposing flaws, and they're too big of flaws to ignore. Now, if you just do a primer coat, a light primer coat, that'll expose a lot of those flaws before we start going into the heavier paint, and before we start having to fix them afterwards. We don't want necessarily paint in those flaws, because filling them with other materials, the paint can kind of block it, get in the way, and make it so that it's less structurally stable. Or we can have the, like, say we fill it with Bondo and there's paint in there, the Bondo is more likely to pop out because it can break away via the paint. We want it to bond to the material that it's filling preferably. So even when I do a kind of light layering of Bondo, or sorry, base coat paint, I try not to have it too heavy, and I try not to totally fill whatever imperfections. Now, I do use other fillers such as wood filler and in Magicoat, but those are for much smaller imperfections. These are much bigger areas, so I'm going to be using Bondo and then sanding them out there. Now, we have added our Warbler detail. All the red trim you see here is all Warbler we've stretched out and painted. And we, of course, have been doing the same base coat of red first. In fact, probably 2 layers of red in this case, and then the black. Because if we mess up and we overextend the black, it's going to be much harder to cover up with the red. If there's any small little nicks of red that spill over when we start doing our initial passes, that's not a big deal. The black will cover it, no problem. But here I am, once we have the black and the red in place, I'm kind of just finding those little spaces where the lines aren't totally perfect and fixing them. Because, of course, I'm still not totally 100% flawless. I'm just going to clean up these lines as best I can to make them look good. And then you see the little red bits of Warbler on the front there. Those are also kind of additional Warbler bumpers, in a way. They're extra layers of Warbler so that when they do get put down, they'll wear out on those first rather than just on the facing. Those are actually details on the piece. It's kind of this this Tron kind of look to it, a glowing Tron kind of look to it, and that's the theme of the piece. We are going to, of course, varnish everything. In case you didn't see the pictures, yes, we varnished absolutely everything to protect the coats, and that is the piece. You can see the piece of acrylic there. It's very clear and hard to notice, and that will help stabilize it. But back to the point, next we're going to be making armor. We're actually going to start on the armor itself. I hope you check it out. Thanks for watching. Good times to all. Rah. Some cosplay goodness. Links in the description. Hope you guys enjoy. Good times to all.